Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and so Hoyoverse just officially released the details on the new catalyst Tulaytullah's Remembrance that we previously saw on the live stream. So let's just run through some quick thoughts on this weapon and how it applies to every single character that we currently have in the catalyst lineup for Genshin Impact. Now in quick summary, this weapon is best used by a normal attacking DPS who wants to take up not only a significant amount of fill time since you want to build the stacks, but also a support that can scale very well with high base attack and crit damage and wants the stats to be consistent. And to draw a comparison to something a little more familiar, this weapon is kind of like the middle ground between Kagura's Verity, where there's that crit damage, the Skyward Atlas for the high base attack, as well as the Lost Prayer in concept where the character wants to be on field for a very long time to get the maximum stacks of its passive. Of course, 4-star Witsiv is also going to be compared to this weapon quite often. While many people are focusing on rating this weapon based on its passive, at its core, it's still tied to the highest base attack catalyst in the game and also a crit damage substat. What many people might not be thinking of right now is that it's actually quite valuable for one day when we have a cryo catalyst user that uses a 4-piece Blizzard Strayer and also scales off attack. And of course, the person that uses this weapon best with its high base attack is Scaramouche. With his high base attack, crit substats, passive ability, of course, it's no surprise since it's his signature weapon. I will do a build guide for him later on, so you guys can stay tuned for that, since this video is really specifically for Tulaytullah's Remembrance utility for the rest of the roster as well. And as we look at the rest of the character roster, my biggest issue generally with this weapon is that it actually competes very closely with the 4-star Witsiv. For those especially who don't utilize the normal attack damage and normal attack speed, substat and passive that this weapon has. Witsiv offers 11% more crit damage but 30% less base attack. Of course, this weapon is slightly more consistent because Witsiv has downtime. But anyway, let's jump right back into the lineup. This weapon is actually pretty good and well used by Heizou as well, since he scales off attack and crit in a similar manner and fashion to Wanderer. Sucrose, on the other hand, does prefer Elemental Mastery substat weapons or Witsiv with an occasional EM bump even as a main driver Sucrose in like a Kokomi team and etc. And one character I really want to talk a bit more about is Ningguang, and I think Ningguang might actually like this weapon quite a bit, especially since the EM from Witsiv is not really useful for a Geo character like Ningguang, and Geo teams, if you think about it, with Ito, Noel or perhaps Albedo inside, generally doesn't really have a dedicated attack buffer. And the high base stats from this weapon allows Ningguang to function both as like an on-field filler for when Ito or Noel has downtime, or even like as a burst support where she just comes in E, Q and just E's again and swaps off the field. And as for the Heizou trio, Kokomi will much prefer Prototype Ember, although I do see a possibility for some niche and meme crit Kokomi builds. And Mona, when comparing this weapon to the Witsiv, might prefer the consistency of this weapon a little more, since the long 30 seconds cooldown of Witsiv is not really well utilized by Mona since her rotations are very short because of her low energy cost and low cooldown. Main driver DPS Mona might not really find much value in these passive effects since she utilizes quite a bit on charge attacks as well. For Barbara, of course, it's going to be a little bit more niche if you are trying to run a driver main DPS Barbara for a Bloom team or some other variant option. And as for Yae Miko, this weapon could be a pretty decent substitute, especially if you don't have a signature Kagura's Verity on Yae Miko, since she doesn't actually snapshot when she's using her elemental skill and can utilize its high base attack and crit substats very well. The passive is quite niche for her since that most of her damage from Yae Miko's kit comes from elemental skill rather than a significant amount coming from auto attacks. It's good stats for Lisa as well, in terms of base attack and crit damage, but overall I do think that she will struggle a little bit with energy recharge with this weapon, and from an overall, if you zoom out and think about the overall account perspective, I do think that Lisa might prefer something, for example like Hakushin Ring to buff a Dendro unit, or perhaps Favonia's Codex to give energy to the team and herself as well. And two other characters which I'm giving a special blue rating, which means that it's good in theory but I need to see it in action, is Klee and Yanfei might switch to a normal attacking style with this weapon and could actually make use of this weapon quite well. It allows them to run an Elemental Mastery sense given its high base attack that it already provides them, and 48% normal attack damage is nothing to scoff about. And I do think that this weapon actually allows them to play very differently and flexibly from what we are currently aware of, and I really do need to see this weapon being tested more before I can make a final conclusion. But in theory, it does seem this weapon is actually pretty and very good for Klee, and she might switch to more of a normal attacking style with this weapon. Nahida's kit revolves around elemental skill damage more so than normal attack damage. I will prefer Kagura's Verity on her if you are looking for a non-signature 5-star crit weapon for her. And of course, I do think that EM weapons work perfectly fine for her already as well. An analogy I like to talk about is if you are not using this weapon for Scara, or maybe Klee or Ningguang, this catalyst is like driving a Ferrari into a city with speed limits everywhere. Expensive and posh, but really largely a luxury. This new catalyst offers more consistency in damage versus the Widsith, but possibly for 200 fates worth of Primo Gems, I do think that the overall benefit of this weapon does pale in comparison to the Widsith, as it offers much more value from a 4-star alternative. And if you like such detailed breakdowns, you might like this one for the new event weapon in version 3.3 as well. Like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.